The Civil War started over slavery, states' rights, and westward expansion. The Battle of Gettysburg marked the turning point of the Civil War. With more than 50,000 estimated dead, the three-day engagement was the bloodiest single battle of conflict. Gettysburg ended General Lee's second attempt to invade the North and bring the Civil War to a quick end. In the North, manufacturing and industry was well established, and agriculture was mostly limited to small-scale farms, while the South's economy was based on a system of large-scale farming that depended on the labor of black enslaved people to grow certain crops, especially cotton and tobacco. In 1854, the U.S. Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which opened all new territories to slavery by using the rule of popular sovereignty over congressional official order. Pro- and anti-slavery forces struggled violently in Bleeding Kansas, while protests to the act in the North led to the formation of the Republican Party. After the Supreme Court's 1857 ruling in Dred Scott case confirmed the legality of slavery in the territories, the abolitionist John Brown's raid at Harper's Ferry in 1859 convinced more and more Southerners that their northern neighbors were intent on the destruction of slavery. Abraham Lincoln's election in November 1860 was the final straw. The Southern states seceded from the United States. They formed the Confederate States of America. The two groups were the Confederate, the Southern states, and the Union, the Northern states. The Confederate soldiers wore gray and the Union soldiers wore blue. The American Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces opened fire on the Union-held Fort Sumter. In South Carolina's Charleston Harbor, less than 34 hours later, Union forces surrendered. Henry C. Wilde volunteered at age 15, even though he said he was 18, for the 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade, Company C, on September 13, 1861. He was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. The brigade advanced on Winchester, Virginia, Strasburg, and then defended Harper's Ferry. In September of 1862, they surrendered. They were paroled and were sent to Indianapolis, Maryland, by June of 1863. They joined Lockwood's brigade and began to march toward Gettysburg. After his victory at Chancellorsville in Virginia, Confederate Commander Lee decided to focus on invading the North in what he called the Gettysburg Campaign. The boulders scattered across the landscape and also the rocks of Devil's Den provided cover and strategic defensive positions for the soldiers. Thin soil on many of the sides and tops of hills also made it almost impossible for the Union soldiers to entrench themselves. July 1st, 1863, early that morning, Confederate division under Major General Henry Heth marched toward Gettysburg to seize supplies. In an unplanned meeting, they confronted Union Cavalry Brigadier General John Buford, which slows the Confederates' advance until the infantry of the Union 1st and 11th Corps under Major General John F. Reynolds arrives. Reynolds is killed in action. Soon, Confederate reinforcements under General A.P. Hill and Richard E. Will reached the scene. By late afternoon, the troops were battling ferociously in the horrible heat. 30,000 Confederates overwhelmed 20,000 Union soldiers who fall back through Gettysburg and fortify Cemetery Hill south of town. On the second day of battle, most of both armies had gathered. The Union line was laid out in a defense formation resembling a fishhook. In the late afternoon of July 2nd, Lee launched a heavy assault on the Union left flank. The fierce fighting raged at Little Round Top, the Wheat Field, Devil's Den, and the Peach Orchard. On the Union right, Confederate demonstrations escalated into full-scale assaults on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill. Despite significant losses, the Union defenders held their lines all across the battlefield. On the third day of battle, fighting resumed on Culp's Hill and cavalry battles raged to the east and the south. But the main event was a dramatic infantry assault by 12,500 Confederates against the center of the Union line on Cemetery Ridge, known as Pickett's Charge. The charge was driven back by Union rifle and artillery fire at great loss to the Confederate Army. Lee led his army on a painful retreat back to Virginia. Between 46,000 and 51,000 soldiers from both armies were killed in the three-day battle, the most in U.S. history. Camp of 93rd NYC. Dear Uncle, we have had an awful fight here, but thank the Lord, our army has given the rebels an everlasting thrashing. The heaviest fight was yesterday, and today they were to fight the militia, but they found to their cost that the old army of the Potomac was around. We must have taken about 8,000 prisoners. The loss in killed and wounded on both sides must be 25,000, and some say the rebels alone have lost that number. General Lee tried to bring the flag of truce game on General Meade, but it failed to work. General Meade sent back that he would bury their dead for them. We are camped about 1.5 miles from Gettysburg, right on the battlefield, which is very large. I have seen but very little of it, as we have been momentarily under orders to be ready to move Waterswhip Old Brahman to his uncle, dated July 5, 1863. Henry C. Wilde continued to march on with his brigade in pursuit of Lee. After a year of defense victories in Virginia, Lee's objective was to win a battle north of the Mason-Dixon line in the hopes of forcing an end to the fighting. His losses at Gettysburg dashed the hopes of Confederate States of America to become an independent nation. Instead, the defeated general fled south with a wagon train of wounded soldiers toward the Potomac. Union General Meade failed to pursue the retreating army, missing a critical opportunity to trap Lee and force a Confederate surrender. The war raged on for another 2 years. On November 19, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln used the dedication ceremony for the Gettysburg National Cemetery to honor the fallen Union soldiers and redefine the purpose of the war in his historic Gettysburg address. Henry C. Wilde survived the Civil War that left a mark on all that were involved. He went on to become a laborer, weighmaster, and foreman. The monument at Gettysburg for the 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade reads effective strength 739 casualties killed, 23 wounded, 80 missing, 1 total 104. Although the war went on for almost 2 more years, Gettysburg was a turning point toward the final Union victory in 1865. That victory meant more than holding together the United States as a country. It also meant the end of slavery, the institution that had divided the nation since its founding in 1776. Following the Civil War, the United States was in Reconstruction era from 1865 to 1877, when several United States administrations attempted to reconstruct society and the former Confederate States back into the Union. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, is considered the most important engagement of the American Civil War. Gettysburg was a turning point for the victory of the Union and the failure of the Confederacy.